Creators are rewarded right now for quantity over quality. And so who's doing the quality assurance? How can you know that the person on the other side of the screen isn't saying something, regardless of if it's true, just for the money? Very few people have been called out on being a sellout, since the monetization on YouTube and the creator industry as a whole is relatively new. And of course, it's a very nuanced topic, and freedom of expression is important. So what can be done about it? The first thing that you can do is learn how to identify the ways that a creator might be prioritizing creating for money instead of providing value to you. The creator industry is maturing, which has a lot of implications and a lot of bubbles that can pop. Right now, that bubble appears to be creator monetization, as creators are starting to be called out on deceptive behavior. What do Logan Paul, XQC, and Linus Tech tips have in common? They've all recently been called out for ethically controversial behavior, but should they be canceled for it? What should be done about it? By the end of this video, you'll be able to answer that for yourself by talking about the conversations surrounding these controversies and how it affects you. Right now, it sometimes feels like very few creators will give real and fair reviews of brands because people either want money from popular brands or want clicks from bashing on one that's not funding them. And it's one of the reasons why we suddenly have reviewers called out en masse when it hasn't been happening before. With the creator industry maturing, this seems to be shifting. People seem to be realizing that not everyone who is speaking is telling the truth because monetization opportunities have increased. So honestly, a little bit of honesty is needed. Don't believe me? Reviewers have had immense influences in industries for a long time. Do you remember the South Park episode where Cartman becomes a corrupt Yelp reviewer? That's kind of real. Publishing has been heavily influenced by reviewers and Barnes & Noble back in the day. I don't really know how much that holds up now in the digital age. So more currently, gaming is heavily influenced now by large streamers and YouTubers. And this has led to a bit of mob mentality, preying on the uninformed, and what I like to call parroting. This game is bad, and anyone who likes it isn't a real gamer.
This game is bad, and anyone who likes it isn't a real gamer.
Parroting. When a creator's large fan base... No, you're done now. You see what parroting does? When a creator's large fan base just repeats everything that they say without a shred of individual thought, that's parroting. And this has existed long before our current social structure. It's called mob mentality, which is actually where bullying can flourish, and it can also be used to control entire industries. Mob mentality is a monetizable phenomenon for those who find the right way to bottle it, like sports. It's something many of us have even studied in school and literature such as Lord of the Flies, one of my personal favorite novels. And ironically, it's often the way that we talk about creators who make mistakes. Everybody piles on with anything they've ever heard or seen or experienced bad with that creator. And while it's helpful when people have a platform for something that maybe they were scared to come out with before, that is something that people maybe should know, it generally leads to a lot of discourse that is pretty unhelpful. We need more nuance in these conversations. Otherwise, we don't just end up with stories and novels, we end up with historical tragedies in real life, like the Salem witch trials, for instance. Yes, that's a worst case scenario. The more common result of sacrificing our individual thoughts as a trade for the thoughts of our favorite creator is that we push the doors wide open for all sorts of bad behavior, such as conflict of interest, like in the current Linus Tech tips drama. The LTT YouTube channel has allegedly given away a prototype that had been requested to be sent back to the company that provided it to them for review. They've also been accused of allegedly cutting corners in their videos, giving skewed and even incorrect results for reviews, which could bolster a product that doesn't deserve it, or even completely decimate a company when you are giving these reviews to millions of people. I've also heard complaints of them being hired by certain companies and then bashing competitors. And the real issue here isn't with Linus Tech Tips. It's the entire creator monetization industry. They're just one example at the very top. The conflicts of interest in monetizing creators should erode trust. What's that old adage about power and responsibility? Linus Tech Tips is one of the largest YouTube channels in the entire world, not to mention in the tech review industry. It's one thing for individual creators or small teams to make mistakes during their learning process, because there's a lot of learning process when it comes to content and how to do it responsibly. We all make mistakes. We don't need to make an apology video for every single mistake that we make, but we do need to hold ourselves accountable and do things that will allow us to grow and move forward. And for a large team such as Linus Tech Tips, they're an established enterprise. They've been doing this for long enough and at a very high level that they should know better. Again, this is is all alleged, but using them as an example, there's a lot of conflict of interest within the creator industry simply because of the monetization. For smaller creators, though, what does this mean? So at its most basic level, it can look like promoting brands that you don't use yourself or that have shady or outright harmful business practices that maybe you just don't know about. And this is different than commercials buying spots on TV. It's why so many brands now pay creators, because there's a parasocial, interpersonal, like trust relationship with audiences that is stronger than somebody watching a commercial on a TV, because they can interact with them and they see more raw, personal type of content than if they're just watching a very produced piece of content. And because they feel like they have some sort of parasocial relationship with this creator, or just really respect the creator, or there's a sense of influence there that's different than the way that we have advertised in the past. That's why it's so powerful. And so if you're promoting something that you don't use, that you don't believe in, that you haven't done any research on, it can cause some harm. For instance, taking sponsorships within the industry you commentate on, it's become the norm, and the brands that pay will automatically have an advantage within that industry. Review content plus sponsorships in that industry will result in some corruption, no matter which way you slice it. Even companies that are generally good but have faulty products and services sometimes have those mistakes overlooked because of this. People want to have sponsored video content and freebies, so they'll sometimes only ever have good things to say about a brand, even when the specific video or content, even on other platforms, isn't directly sponsored. Some will even go so far as to also criticize the company's competitors. Companies are often buying more than a single video's sponsorship with their payments to creators, and they know that. It's why they offer so much. And all the scams and bad actors, whether they're businesses or creators that promote them, from allegations against BetterHelp that has sponsored an overwhelming number of YouTubers, to sponsorships that suggest you can become royalty for buying a blade of grass in Scotland, and all of the many crypto scams that we keep overlooking, like the alleged Logan Paul crypto zoo scam called out by CoffeeZilla, who, by the way, is one of the only YouTubers that has really gained traction in deep, fully researched, and risky call-outs throughout the creator industry. Because fairly enough, creators don't like to be called out. And I think more creators would actually grow and change and shift behaviors, take real responsibility and accountability, if they weren't so overtly attacked every time a mistake is pointed out. It's part of the culture. So I don't entirely blame any creator that's called out. The cancel culture and the piling on, this epidemic doesn't help anyone. It doesn't allow for any growth. We all make mistakes. Many times in the creator industry, businesses and the creators who support them have gotten away with allegedly illegal practices and schemes. They don't have to be outright grifters with scams to be harmful. There are brands, especially that I've seen in the live streaming space, that prey on small creators. They hype them up with opportunities that they call sponsorships, when a lot of the business's sales are probably from the creators that they sponsor, because those creators don't have a large enough audience to monetize yet. They sponsor with affiliate codes for products and no other benefits. And these products are something that they might not look twice at otherwise, but they do because they've been made to feel special. They don't know better because they're simply uninformed. And all of us can get caught up in hype, and we want to be lifted up in an industry that can be kind of tough to even get a footing in. So if this has happened to you, you are not alone. Don't feel silly. There's a lot to navigate in this industry. That's why sharing this type of information is important. And I can't go over the topic of quality content and ethics without mentioning how bad the area of content theft is. I'm not talking about inspired content, but there's a lot of debate recently about reaction videos, with people suggesting that creators like XQC are hardly reacting and simply making money off of others' work. Regardless of whatever side you're on there, since that could be a whole different video topic, there are creators like Brent Riviera who have been accused of outright plagiarism of other creators, and many Mr. Beast copies that steal everything from his exact idea to script to thumbnails. Speaking of Mr. Beast, one of his videos was just copyright striked, then freed of it all within a day. We don't know all of the details behind it, and it's very possible that his team did absolutely nothing wrong. I'm just stating the discussions and the accusations that have come up today as an example of how copyright can be very misused. Now, while getting credit and/or payment for your work is certainly something I support, it should potentially be on a percentage basis rather than a copyright claim getting the entire monetization for a video or getting the entire thing taken down. The graphic, whether or not the situation is even true, was not worth the amount of the entire video and certainly wasn't worth it getting taken down. We need to have a fair system for this. And it wasn't even as valuable as, say, the accusations that are flying around with some of the React content that's being re-uploaded on the same platform that it originally is posted on, and then potentially having competition that way, or a thumbnail that's a carbon copy of someone else's idea, and regulations like DMCA, which is constantly frustrating for all creators because they seem overly punishing for the actual situation. And it goes further than simply the ethics of it, because often it's not worth fighting until it scales. No one cares if someone with 19 followers reposts their content unless it's used in a way that could be harmful to their brand. But if your content is shown to millions and it's a situation of punching down, meaning taking from someone smaller than you, of course you're going to want your fair cut, or at the very least, a shout out. That's why we generally hold businesses to a higher degree of responsibility than creators, but as the lines blur between creators and full-scale enterprises, so does that responsibility. If a small creator makes a mistake or takes their passion for a piece of art too far, it might go unnoticed or probably doesn't cause that much harm. And honestly, there are a lot of gray areas, and it's difficult to know where to draw lines. The sheer volume of memes across the internet that are probably breaking regulations, but that we wouldn't be having nearly as much fun without, really sums up this debate perfectly. But there are lines. And someone with millions in resources has a lot more tools and experience at their disposal to cross fewer of them. There's nothing new under the sun, and fair use is necessary for art. Some days I personally wish the regulations didn't exist at all, just so that I could share something that I'm really excited about and that might create something that offers a benefit to others. But without regulations, can we hold each other accountable? Remember how I mentioned quality assurance? Mistakes happen, but how much are we as creators liable for what we promote? I mean, how responsible are we for the consequences of what we produce? Ethically. Creating is an art, and the ethics of art have been debated since long before I joined the conversation. In fact, before you or I were even born. This is obviously a nuanced topic. Creators need to make money, and I've been nervous about even making a video like this, and there's so few videos on this topic because every brand and creator that I've mentioned in a negative light will probably now never work with me, and others may be nervous too when they know that I'm not afraid to tell the truth. And while I shouldn't want them to, for the reasons that I mentioned, if they're not alleged but true, networking and especially sponsorships are a large percentage of a creator's income. And limiting that for myself might be a win for integrity, but it'll hardly matter if I can't make enough money to continue making content and thereby not getting anyone to actually see my videos. And that's all best case. Worst case is that these companies or even large creators have far more resources than the individual creators that call them out. And the threat of legal action for perfectly valid criticisms is alive and well. And if someone tries to offer a criticism and then makes a mistake, you can make mistakes or flat out lie to sell a product with much less risk than the risk of making a mistake in calling out a business's dirty practices. This inherently leads to an entire industry of bias. Truth is, integrity doesn't pay the bills, and that's all of our faults. We remain focused on some of the wrong issues, like DMCA, which I think most of us would agree is a greedy system that only benefits already successful businesses, but there's very little that we can do about it. And we've contributed to creating this mess by being afraid to speak up, by letting scams pay our favorite creators' bills, by getting scammed, by continuing to praise creators who scam us, by parroting what they say, by participating in cancel culture, by continuing to support those who don't show signs of actively changing and growing, and by creating a culture that doesn't promote content profitability sharing and doesn't allow for us to give credit and move forward even after we make mistakes. Some of these contradict each other, but that's the point. No matter which side you're on in the conversation, we've made a mess of it. So if you're not convinced that this actually matters to you, masses of people are buying products and getting scammed, but it's not just a loss of money for individuals. Purchased reviews can change and shape entire industries. The same goes for the extent that people will jump on bandwagons for clicks. People often will only criticize something after their favorite creator or enough people have made them feel cool, right, and safe in expressing something that will get them the most digital currency, aka attention, without caring whether or not it's even true. On top of all of this, creators that are clearly focused on quantity over quality, which is something that is coming to light when people call out live streamers who are doing React content where maybe they might not be reacting very much and then uploading it to YouTube. There's a whole discussion there. And when we're talking about daily upload YouTubers like Linus Tech Tips that allegedly cut corners, they're not just making mistakes, but setting a precedent that poor content done often is better than good content done less often. And this keeps every creator working at a breakneck pace in order to compete, especially those that are doing more research, more analysis, more due diligence, since that content takes longer to produce and thus doesn't make as much money as quickly. So what do? There's been increasing regulation in the industry from the FTC, but that doesn't even cover half the type of behavior creators do in relation to monetization, nor should it. Too much red tape puts too many barriers to entry and hurts freedom of expression in art. It's why social media, new platforms, and all of this has been so fun and successful in recent years. You don't have to be a billion-dollar company anymore in order to create something fun and publish it for millions of viewers. So regardless of your thoughts on regulation in general, I think this boils down more to personal responsibility. Something I advocate for in all of my content, but not just personal responsibility. I don't mean giving black and white answers to nuanced questions. I don't think that an answer would be, never accept a sponsorship in the industry that you commentate on. That would be a silly, oversimplified approach that even I probably won't follow myself. It also isn't super realistic for creators to need to spend hundreds of hours researching every brand they work with for due diligence. And it's unreasonable for viewers to boycott or cancel any creator that doesn't own up to one mistake, or even multiple. Going back to regulation versus personal responsibility for a moment, there is a level of harm that should be cancelable, and that's crime. Creators and businesses should be allowed to move forward responsibly more often without it becoming a whirlwind of personal attacks, and we'd all be better for it. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to change our minds. The only thing certain in life is change. So I think a start would be to stop worshiping brands and creators, since every single one of them make mistakes. Maybe that would help with the cancel culture epidemic. Allow for criticisms that are actually true and that matter to be actively decided on rather than parroted, and then acted on responsibly by individuals rather than having nonsense regurgitated and fed to us like mindless little baby birds. But the entire creator industry right now is set up for selling out. The bigger the bubble, the bigger the pop. What are your thoughts? Like I said, this is a hugely nuanced topic, and I don't particularly love presenting a problem without a solution, but I think it's up to each one of us, up to you. So I figured a video starting the conversation could lead to some solutions in the future. Make sure to psych and subscribe if you want to see what comes of this topic, especially in talking about corporate or creator lifestyles and topics. I'm Mad Curious. This is my Mad Means Business channel, and I will see you in the next one.